the whole point, or not the whole point, but one of the big points of putting real world assets right on blockchains, whether it's Provenance or other ones, is that they're, the asset that the end user owns, there's like a community that acknowledges that fact, that ownership claim, as opposed to just, I have my money's in a particular bank somewhere. And well, how do you know? Well, because if I log in, their website says it is. And, they're a big firm. And if they just took my money, I could call the police, I suppose, or just, word of mouth, people would stop giving their money to that bank. But I'm ultimately relying on the goodwill of the bank, either their integrity or, their competence, that they're not going to make a bookkeeping error on their end. Whereas something's a blockchain, again, whether it's truly public or even just a limited set of validators. But the idea is that responsibility is more diffused. There's like a whole community of people that if something gets added to the chain, they've all signed off, or at least, in a process that one of them's randomly picked or something, if it's a proof of stake. So that they're, again, the point being diffusing the responsibility, so you're not just relying on the integrity or the competence of one institution.
Yeah, and, I would say that has been the idea, and that has been the hope. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of cases where even in blockchain that hasn't been the case. So, if you look at FTX or Celsius or, Three Arrows Capital, et cetera, we've seen these blow up where people have trusted centralized exchanges. And so in theory, yes, to exactly what, you just said, really, you don't even want to trust those other community members who are validating that this is right. You want to be able to go to the data source itself and cryptographically prove that this thing is real. Mm-hmm. Now, at some point, yes, you do have to start trusting the ecosystem, because not everybody's going to sit in their home checking the cryptographic proofs of a block. But this is where I think you see some really interesting things coming up on Provenance. Like Figure has found a company called DART, that's called Digital Asset Registry Technologies. And if you notice, like when FTX collapse happened and the Celsius collapse happened, everybody had cryptocurrency. And then all of a sudden they were in bankruptcy court trying to figure out who gets the cryptocurrency. And why is that if the promise of blockchain is real, right? Mm-hmm. It became centralized. And then all of a sudden in bankruptcy court, it was not clear who had first rights, to the assets that FTX had, et cetera, Celsius had. And so what what DART does is it does a UCC filing that perfects ownership of the asset. So on Provenance, if you come and you're getting a token. If you register through DART, you now have a physical UCC filing that perfects the actual ownership of the asset. And then there's two things that happen. One is you have truth over trust on the blockchain itself. You have the cryptographic proof of the state of whatever it was that you had. So there's the first proof set. And then you have the regulatory environment where you actually have the UCC filing that gives you, true ownership over that asset. So that's something that people, I think, are going to be forced to start looking at more and more, and not just blockchain, because it's great if your asset is on blockchain, but then you go to bankruptcy court and you'd say, here's the cryptographic proof. And they're like, yes, but, this lender, this creditor gets first access, right? So,
Right. And that too, you're talking about FTX, and I remember back, I guess Mt. Gox was one of the earlier ones in terms of just Bitcoin, and I remember a lot of the, the enthusiasts, the Bitcoin purists who just, love the white paper, Satoshi's white paper and the vision that he outlined. And they couldn't understand, like, guys, the whole point was for it to be trustless and so forth. And then why would you hand over your keys? And they were going around, I remember this, like, adamantly telling people, no, Bitcoin didn't fail. It was these people gave their stuff over to this kid running Mt. Gox. It was like it was like Magic the Gathering or something. Like that's what Mt. Gox used to be, came from. So I understand the frustration, but then that's also why, Josh, that I had you elaborate so much, because I've noticed too, even more recently, talking with some, I guess you'd call them Bitcoin maxis, where I explain, what we're doing at Infineo, or just more generally talking about, putting real world assets on. And some of these people think, no, that like you're mixing two things that's oil and water. Like you can't put real world assets on blockchain, because blockchain only really works in its pure vision if the asset is the cryptocurrency, like the Satoshi being moved, not, there's this thing on a blockchain that's pointing to a piece of real estate or, pointing to a HELOC or whatever. So I get where they're coming from, but so be it. Maybe I'll just let you see that train of thought, like that mindset where someone can think, no, blockchain only is for moving intangible things like Satoshis around. And what do you mean you're putting real world assets on a blockchain that's kind of mixing two things and they don't go together? So obviously you agree. What would you say to somebody like that?
No, I honestly, for the most part, I agree, actually, which may be surprising.
It is surprising. So explain.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think there's two parts. There's the purest form where everything is on blockchain. Everything gets originated on blockchain and trades on blockchain. And that is the goal. It needs to be decentralized, originated, and traded on blockchain. And I think that has to be the goal. And not to keep mentioning the figure, but, I think they were on Bloomberg yesterday announcing their decentralized everything market. And this is a market that is truly decentralized with, I'll say a term, we can get into it, but the MPC wallets, it's just a way of decentralizing wallets and custody over an asset where the custody is truly decentralized. So you're not repeating an FTX. And in that market, you'll be able to, I believe, beginning towards the end of April, you'll be able to trade, spot Bitcoin, spot Ethereum, and I believe hash as well. But what is interesting about it is the counterpart is you also have a regulatory environment that you have to comply with. And you can disagree all you want with the regulatory environment. I think a lot of it's there for good reasons, some of it not. You still have to comply, right? And so that is where you want to have that regulatory stack, if you will. So there's multiple ATSs on Provenance, what are alternative trading systems that allows you to use blockchain assets and then trade in that SEC-approved alternative trading system where you have a broker-dealer, you have a transfer agent that exists in the real world. But the goal of all of this is to prove over time that it can be done on blockchain. And then you start to have all of that come onto blockchain in a regulated way. But it's going to take time and for good reason for regulators to get comfortable with all of this trading on blockchain. And I really don't think Figure gets enough credit for what it's done in that decentralized space. A lot of them, may view it as a more of a centralized play. But what they've done is the HELOCs that are done on Provenance, those are digitally native assets. They begin their life cycle on blockchain. And they've done it in a regulated way where even, they've been able to do like the first blockchain AAA rated ABS with Goldman and JP Morgan. And those are digitally native assets. And the reason why, sorry, this is long-winded. No
problem.
The reason why I think a lot of people criticize real-world assets, and they're right to, is a lot of what has been done on blockchain is just digital twinning of assets. It's not digitally native assets. And so when you look at a lot of the announcements that's been off in the space, it's been someone keeping two ledgers. And in that case, you have no enforceability mechanism in the real world if you're holding a token, and that's a problem, and the purists are right. But if you have an enforceability mechanism in the real world because you've done your UCC filing, you've perfected ownership of the asset, and whoever is then trading that asset on chain, then you're able to get, I think, 80 to 90% of the way there with what the purists want. On-chain price discoverability, on-chain trading, actually having authority in the real world to state ownership of your asset in a court should it go to that. And if you're just digitally twinning assets, you can't. So, and your costs are high. So why?
Right.